or alternative requirements related to fair housing and non-discrimination, including the requirement to provide housing and services to individuals with disabilities in integrated settings. C. Implementation. The Secretary shall have authority to issue such regulations or other notices, guidance, forms, instructions, and publications as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the programs, projects, or activities authorized under this section, including to ensure that such programs, projects, or activities are completed in a timely and effective manner. Sec. 40010. Project-based rental assistance. A. Appropriation. In addition to amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in this section referred to as the Secretary, for fiscal year 2022, out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated. 1. $14,760,000,000 for the Project-Based Rental Assistance Program, as authorized under Section 8(b) of the United States Housing Act of 1937, 42 U.S.C. 1437(f)(b), in this section referred to as the Act, subject to the terms and conditions of subsection B of this section. 2. $40 million for providing technical assistance to recipients of or applicants for project-based rental assistance or to states allocating the project-based rental assistance, and 3. $200 million for the costs to the Secretary of administering and overseeing the implementation of this section and the Section 8 Project-Based Rental Assistance Program generally, including information technology, financial reporting, research and evaluations, and other cross-program costs in support of programs administered by the Secretary in this title, and other costs, and the Secretary may transfer and merge amounts appropriated under this subparagraph to Section 40301. Amounts appropriated by this section shall remain available until September 30, 2031. B. Terms and conditions. 1. Authority, notwithstanding Section 8(a), the Act, 42 U.S.C. 1437(f)(a). The Secretary may use amounts made available under this section to provide assistance payments with respect to newly constructed housing, existing housing, or substantially rehabilitated non-housing structures for use as new multifamily housing in accordance with this section and the provisions of Section 8 of the Act. In addition, the Secretary may use amounts made available under this section for performance-based contract administrators for Section 8 project-based assistance, for carrying out this section and Section 8 of the Act. 2. Project-based rental assistance. The Secretary may make assistance payments using amounts made available under this section pursuant to contracts with owners or prospective owners who agree to construct housing, to substantially rehabilitate existing housing, to substantially rehabilitate non-housing structures for use as new multifamily housing, or to attach the assistance to newly constructed housing in which some or all of the units shall be available for occupancy by very low-income families in accordance with the provisions of Section 8 of the Act. In awarding contracts pursuant to this section, the Secretary shall give priority to owners or prospective owners of multifamily housing projects located or to be located in areas of high opportunity, as defined by the Secretary, in areas experiencing economic growth or rising housing prices to prevent displacement or secure affordable housing for low-income households, or that serve people at risk of homelessness or that integrate additional units that are accessible for persons with mobility impairments and persons with hearing or visual impairments beyond those required by applicable federal accessibility standards. 3. Allocation. The Secretary may use various mechanisms, alone or in combination, to award grants with amounts made available under this section, including a. Using a competitive process, which the Secretary may carry out in multiple rounds of competition, each of which may have its own selection, performance, and reporting criteria as established by the Secretary. b. Selecting proposals submitted through FHA loan applications that meet specified criteria. c. Delegating to states and territories the awarding of contracts, including related determinations such as the maximum monthly rent, subject to the requirements of Section 8 of the Act, as determined by the Secretary. And d. Using any other means that the Secretary determines to be reasonable to accomplish the purposes of this section. 4. Contract term, rent setting, and rent adjustments. The Secretary may set the terms of the contract, including the duration and provisions regarding rent setting and rent adjustments. c. Waivers. The Secretary may waive or specify alternative requirements for any provision of Section 8 of the Act, 42 U.S.C. 1437 or regulation that the Secretary administers that is applicable to such statute other than requirements related to tenant rights and protections, rent setting, fair housing, non-discrimination, labor standards, and the environment, upon a finding that the waiver or alternative requirement is necessary to expedite or facilitate the use of amounts made available under this section. d. Implementation. The Secretary shall have the authority to issue such regulations or other notices, guidance, forms, instructions, and publications as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the programs, projects, or activities authorized under this section, including to ensure that such programs, projects, or activities are completed in a timely and effective manner. Sec. 40011. Investments in Native American communities. A. Appropriation. In addition to amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in this section referred to as the Secretary, for fiscal year 2022, out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated. 1. $784,375,000 for grants under Title I of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, in this section referred to as NAHASDA, 25 U.S.C. 4101 et. Sec. and the Secretary shall distribute such amount according to the same funding formula used in fiscal year 2021. 2. $7 million for grants under Title 8 of NAHASDA, 25 U.S.C. 4221 et seq. 3. $784,375,000 for competitive grants to eligible recipients authorized under Title I of NAHASDA, 25 U.S.C. 4111 et seq. Which may be used for a. New construction and rehabilitation of affordable housing, b. Improving water or energy efficiency or increasing resilience to natural hazards for housing assisted by amounts made available under this subsection, or c. Other eligible affordable housing activities under NAHASDA. 4. $334,250,000 for a. Competitive Single-Purpose Indian Community Development Block Grants for Indian Tribes under Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, 42 U.S.C. 5301 et seq. And b. Imminent Threat Grants under Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, 42 U.S.C. 5301 et seq. For Indian tribes, or a tribal organization, governmental entity, or non-profit organization designated by the Indian tribe to apply for a grant on its behalf, which may be used to I. Address environmental threats, including long-term environmental threats, 2. Assist Indian tribes with relocating a portion of or entire communities due to changes to the local environment, or 3. Assist Indian tribes with addressing other threats to health and safety. $50 million for the costs to the Secretary of administering and overseeing the implementation of this section and Native American programs generally, including information technology, financial reporting, research and evaluations, other cross-program costs in support of programs administered by the Secretary in this Act, and other costs, and 6. $40 million to make new awards or increase prior awards to existing technical assistance providers to provide an immediate increase in capacity building and technical assistance to grantees, and the Secretary may use not more than 10% of the amount under this paragraph to increase prior awards to existing technical assistance providers to provide an immediate increase in capacity building and technical assistance. Amounts appropriated by this section shall remain available until September 30, 2031. b. Grantee eligibility, notwithstanding any other provision of this section, of NAHASDA, 25 U.S.C. 4101 et seq., or of the provisions of Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, 42 U.S.C. 5301 et seq., applicable to the Indian Community Development Block Grant Program. An Indian tribe shall be ineligible to receive grants with amounts made available under this section if the Secretary determines that the Indian tribe is not in compliance with obligations under its 1866 treaty with the United States as it relates to the inclusion of persons who are lineal descendants of freedmen as having the rights of the citizens of such tribes, unless a federal court has issued a final order that determines the treaty obligations with respect to including freedmen as citizens. For purposes of this subsection, a court